May God bless your day, and may your week ahead be filled with grace, peace, and profound insight. Which is, actually a really stark contrast to the intense, literal life or death texts we are diving into today.
Oh, absolutely. It's a completely different vibe.
Yeah. But welcome to the deep dive. Today we're immersing ourselves in a divine blueprint. We are talking about ancient perfume piracy, globally sourced supply chains, and a sacred room that could literally strike you dead if you walked in without washing your hands.
Which sounds like a movie plot, honestly.
Right. It totally does. We are pulling insights from the Holman and NAA Study Bibles to explore Exodus chapter 30. And to anyone listening, if you thought this was just going to be some ancient architectural blueprint or like a dry list of rules, buckle up.
Yeah, because it is far from a dry list of rules. I mean, when you look closely at the mechanisms at play here, this chapter reveals a really meticulous, multisensory, and just incredibly high-stakes approach to ancient sanctuary worship.
It's intense.
It really is. We're looking at how physical architecture and these strict, uncompromising rituals work together to create a profound, almost overwhelming sense of the sacred. It's about an immersive environment.
So to give you a roadmap for where we're heading today, we're going to uncover how wandering desert nomads tapped into global supply chains spanning continents.
That's the part that always gets me.
Yeah, it's wild. And we're going to examine divine copyright laws regarding scent and dig into the extreme biosafety protocols for ancient priests. So let's just jump right into the very center of this sensory experience, the golden altar of incense.
Right. So if you really want to understand the focal point of these ancient rituals, the golden altar is where you have to focus your attention. The construction itself is, well, it's a statement of immense value and permanence.
Made of acacia wood.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Made of acacia wood, which is this incredibly dense hardwood found in the desert. But then it was overlaid entirely with pure gold. The top, the sides, the horns projecting from the corners, all of it encased in gold.
Wow, just solid gold everywhere.
Yeah. It even featured a gold molding around the edge and these gold rings to hold the wooden carrying poles. And those poles, of course, were also completely overlaid with gold.
Let's actually visualize the dimensions for a second, because that helps ground this in reality for us. It had a square base, 45 centimeters by 45 centimeters.
Or exactly 1 by 1 cubit in ancient measurements, right?
Right, 1 by 1 cubit. And it stood 90 centimeters, or 2 cubits tall. So imagine this gleaming, solid golden pillar, basically 3 feet high, standing in the dim light of a tent.
Yeah, and its placement is crucial here. It is positioned right in front of the heavy veil that shields the Ark of the Testimony.
That's the inner sanctum holding the Ten Commandments, right?
Exactly. The location signifies its absolute importance, and the ritual associated with it is relentless. I mean, Aaron, the high priest, was commanded to burn fragrant incense on this golden altar every single morning when he went in to tend the lamps.
And again in the evening, right?
Yeah, every evening at twilight when he lit the lamps for the night. The text describes it as a continuous, perpetual incense before the Lord throughout their generations. It literally never stops.
Okay, so let's unpack the mechanism here. Because if I'm visualizing this space, it's an enclosed tent in the middle of a dusty, arid wilderness. And there's this constant, heavy burning of incense inside.
Thick smoke, yeah.
Yeah. So it's less like, a modern air purifier that removes scents, and more like a localized terraforming device.
Terraforming. Oh, that's a fantastic way to frame it.
Right. It's constantly pumping out this dense, exclusive atmosphere, almost creating a microclimate of heaven right there in the desert dirt. It signifies to anyone who enters that this space operates under completely different physical and spiritual rules than the world just outside the tent flaps.
Yes, the very composition of the air is transformed to represent the divine presence. And what's really crucial here is the strict boundary established around this new atmosphere.
The rules about what you can actually burn.
Exactly. The text is incredibly clear. There is to be absolutely no strange or unauthorized incense offered on this golden altar.
So no improvising.
Zero. No burnt animal offerings, no grain offerings, no drink offerings. Only the highly specific prescribed incense can be burned here.
When I hear the phrase strange incense, my modern brain just thinks, like a weird lavender blend someone made at home?
Right, like an essential oil mix?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing strange in this context carries a much heavier, legal or theological weight.
It absolutely does. If we connect this to the broader biblical theology detailed in the study notes, it really comes down to the concept of holiness.
Okay.
Holiness fundamentally implies exclusivity, separation, and otherness. The prohibition against strange incense emphasizes that not all worship, and honestly, not all human good intentions, are acceptable in this specific space.
You can't just bring whatever you feel like.
Right. You cannot approach the divine on your own terms, or bring in a scent you personally happen to enjoy. It has to be done exactly as prescribed by the Creator. And once a year, its ultimate purity is reinforced when the high priest makes atonement on its golden horns with the blood of a sin offering.
See, we usually think of worship today as something very personal and highly subjective, where, it's the thought that counts.
Oh, for sure.
But here, the thought doesn't count at all if the formula is wrong. So that sets the hyper-exclusive golden rules for the inner sanctum.
Yeah.
But the people outside, the ones actually funding this elaborate setup, they have their own very specific and honestly kind of terrifying rules to follow.
Oh, definitely. Which brings us to the census ransom.
Right. Let's get into that.
So according to the text, whenever a census was taken of the Israelites, specifically counting everyone 20 years old and older, each person had to pay a ransom for their soul to the Lord.
Just a casual ransom for your soul.
Yeah, no big deal, right? But the stakes for this administrative task were incredibly high. They were required to pay this ransom so that no plague would break out among them when they were counted.
Just pause and think about that for a second. You count the people without paying the ransom, and a deadly plague hits the camp. That is an extreme consequence for taking a head count.
It really underscores the danger of the sacred.
Yeah, and the cost of this ransom is set at half a shekel, according to the sanctuary weight standard. The study notes clarify this is exactly 6 grams of silver.
6 grams.
Right, which, imagine holding a couple of modern pennies. That's roughly the weight in silver we're talking about here. It's about a day's wage for a laborer. So it's significant, but accessible.
Yes, manageable for most.
But here's where it gets counterintuitive to our modern sensibilities. The vital, uncompromising rule is that the rich cannot pay more than those 6 grams, and the poor cannot pay less.
It is a strict flat rate, enforced entirely regardless of personal wealth or status.
See, I have to push back on this setup. Isn't taxation, especially in ancient societies, usually progressive? Or at least based on what a ruler can extract from the wealthy?
Usually, yes.
So why would a multimillionaire with massive flocks of sheep and someone struggling just to feed their family pay the exact same 6 grams of silver? I mean, that amount might be pocket change to one person and a massive painful sacrifice for another. Why set it up to be a flat rate?
It's a great question. You really have to think about the psychology and the historical context of that rule, which the study notes address beautifully. You have to remember that this census wasn't about raising municipal funds or building desert infrastructure.
So it wasn't just ancient tax collection.
Not at all. The purpose was entirely theological. In the ancient Near East, taking a census was almost always an exercise in royal or military pride. Rulers counted people to draft them for war or just to see how much wealth they could extract.
Oh, wow. So it commodified human life into data points for a king's ego.
Exactly. It's ancient data collection to prove how powerful you are. It turns citizens into property.
Okay, that makes sense.
But the sanctuary ransom flipped that entire narrative. It was a physical, economic reminder that the nation's preservation and strength depended entirely on the Lord, not on the sheer size of their military or their financial reserves.
Right.
By making the payment exactly the same for every single person, it decommodifies them. It proves that human souls have the exact same intrinsic value before God.
No discounts for the poor, but crucially, no VIP upgrades for the rich.
Yes. If the rich were allowed to pay more, human nature dictates they might assume they were buying more favor, or that their soul was somehow worth more to the community's survival because they contributed more.
They totally think they own the place.
Exactly. So by capping the ransom at exactly 6 grams of silver, the sanctuary essentially declares an absolute equality of worth. The funds were then pooled and used for the service of the tent of meeting as a memorial. It tied every single individual equally to the maintenance of the sacred space.
So the census proves that everyone's life is equally valuable to God. But valuable doesn't mean safe.
Definitely.
In fact, getting closer to the divine presence without the right preparation was a literal death sentence. We've seen the equality of the people outside and the uncompromising holiness inside. Now we have to look at the lethal checkpoint between those two worlds.
The Bronze Basin.
The Bronze Basin.
The Bronze Basin serves as one of the most stark visual reminders of the dangerous gap between the common world and the holy space. It was a massive basin made of solid bronze, resting on a bronze stand.
And where was it exactly?
It was placed strategically in the courtyard between the tent of meeting and the large outdoor altar of burnt offering. And its sole purpose was for ritual washing.
And to be clear to anyone listening, this washing wasn't optional hygiene, like they weren't just dusty.
Oh, no.
Aaron and his sons had to wash their hands and their feet with water from this bronze basin every single time before they entered the tent of meeting and before they approached the altar to minister.
Every single time.
Yeah. The text doesn't mince words about the consequences either. It repeatedly states they must wash so that they may not die. This is a perpetual, permanent statute for all generations.
So that they may not die. I mean, when an ancient text repeats a phrase like that, it is demanding your absolute attention. The threshold to the divine is lethal.
It sounds exactly like modern level 4 biosafety lab protocols. Or, even a surgeon's rigorous scrub-in routine before walking into a sterile operating room.
That's a really good comparison.
But the dynamic here is completely inverted. In a hospital, the surgeon scrubs in to protect the vulnerable patient from the microbes the doctor might be carrying in from the street.
Right.
But at the bronze basin, the priests are scrubbing in to protect themselves from the lethal, overwhelming force of divine holiness inside the tent.
That inverted biosafety analogy captures the mechanics perfectly. In the ancient mind, and specifically in the theology of the tabernacle, holiness wasn't just a moral category or a state of mind.
It was real.
It was a physical, almost radioactive reality. It is pure, concentrated life and power. Human beings existing in a fallen, common world naturally accumulate the dirt of everyday life, both physically from walking in the desert and spiritually.
So approaching the Creator required a stark, undeniable physical separation from the commonness of that everyday world. You can't just casually stroll into the presence of absolute power.
No, you can't. The washing of the hands and feet at the bronze basin wasn't about removing physical dust. It was an act of ontological survival.
Ontological survival. Wow.
Yeah. The unholy cannot simply enter the presence of absolute holiness without being destroyed by the sheer contrast. The bronze basin was the necessary physical preparation, the threshold that forced the priest to acknowledge the dangerous reality of stepping out of the common world and into the divine presence.
Okay, so we have the physical preparation of washing at the basin to ensure survival.
Yeah.
But you can't just walk into the sacred space smelling like the desert camp. There is a final, vital step, which is the sensory preparation. This brings us to the holy anointing oil and the holy incense. And the ingredients required for these recipes reveal an ancient logistical network that is genuinely staggering.
It really is. Let's look at the sheer volume and exotic nature of the holy anointing oil first. The recipe given to Moses is incredibly precise, but also massive in scale.
Okay, lay it on us.
It requires 500 shekels, which is about 6 kilograms or over 13 pounds of liquid myrrh.
13 pounds of myrrh.
Yeah. Then half as much, about 3 kilograms or 6.5 pounds of sweet cinnamon. Another 3 kilograms of aromatic cane. 6 kilograms of cassia, and finally 1 hin, or about 3 liters of olive oil to bind it all together.
That is an industrial amount of highly concentrated spice.
It's a huge batch.
And this oil wasn't just for, dabbing on the priests' foreheads. It was used to physically anoint the tent itself, the ark, the table, the lampstand, the golden altar of incense we talked about, the outdoor altar, and the bronze basin.
Everywhere.
Yeah, the text explicitly says, whatever touches these anointed items becomes holy.
Right. And alongside that massive volume of oil, you have the recipe for the holy incense, which was burned perpetually on the golden altar. This required equal parts of stacte, onycha, galbanum, and pure frankincense, all seasoned with salt to keep it pure.
Okay, let's stop and explain what these things actually are, because the study notes blew my mind here.
Oh, they're fascinating.
Right. So stacte is a sweet-smelling resin from a desert shrub. Galbanum's another plant resin, but it's very pungent, almost bitter, used to anchor sweeter scents. But onycha.
Onycha is the wild one.
The notes suggest it likely came from the operculum of a sea mollusk. For anyone listening who's unfamiliar, an operculum is the hard, fingernail-like trapdoor a sea snail uses to close its shell.
Yeah.
When ground up and burned, it produces a deeply earthy scent.
So it's a highly complex, sophisticated chemical perfume utilizing both plant resins and marine life.
But the geographic logistics are the real puzzle for me here. How exactly is a group of wandering desert nomads acquiring this? We are talking about a people currently living in tents in the Sinai Peninsula.
Right. They're not exactly hitting up the local mall.
Exactly. Yet, Myrrh and frankincense came from Arabia and deep into Ethiopia. Galbanum was derived from plants found in Afghanistan and Persia.
It's quite the distance.
And cinnamon. That came from Ceylon, which is modern-day Sri Lanka, and the deep forests of Malaysia. How on earth are wandering Israelites getting Malaysian cinnamon in the middle of a desert?
To understand the how, we have to look at ancient global supply chains. The Sinai Peninsula wasn't an empty vacuum. It was a major, bustling trade corridor connecting Africa to Asia.
Oh, okay.
Long before the famous Silk Road, there were established spice routes. Midianite and Ishmaelite caravans constantly crossed these deserts, carrying luxury goods from the Far East to Egypt.
Right, because Egypt was a powerhouse.
Exactly. Furthermore, the Israelites had just left Egypt, which was the wealthiest, most globally connected empire on earth at the time. They likely tapped into Egyptian trade networks or bartered with passing merchant caravans, using the wealth they carried out of Egypt to acquire these specific, incredibly rare items.
So they essentially leveraged the entire ancient global economy to gather these ingredients.
They did.
But why go through all that trouble and expense? Why not just use local desert scrub brush that was free and everywhere?
That brings us to the theological why. Symbolically, the tabernacle was designed as a microcosm of the known world. By requiring the finest, most exotic, and difficult-to-obtain ingredients from the mountains of Afghanistan to the shores of Ethiopia, from the sea mollusks to the deep forests of Malaysia, they were symbolically gathering up the entire earth.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they were taking the absolute best of global creation and offering it back to the Creator in one concentrated space.
That is a brilliant visual. The whole world, from the ocean floor to the Asian forests, represented in a single drop of oil or a wisp of smoke rising from a golden altar.
It's beautiful.
It is. But there is a massive catch to creating these specific recipes: the divine copyright.
Yes, the copyright. Both the anointing oil and the incense recipes are declared uniquely holy and exclusively the property of the divine. The text explicitly states that anyone who makes these exact formulas for personal use, to use as a personal perfume or air freshener, will be cut off from their people.
Exiled. Completely excommunicated from the community. God essentially copyrighted a smell, and the penalty for ancient perfume piracy was losing your entire society.
It sounds incredibly harsh, but you have to think about how human cognition, memory, and biology actually work. Scent is the sense most strongly and directly tied to the olfactory bulb and the memory centers of the human brain.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, you smell a specific brand of sunscreen or a certain type of floor wax, and suddenly you are violently transported back to being 8 years old at the beach or walking the halls of your elementary school.
Right.
The brain doesn't even process it logically first. It's an instant emotional time travel.
Exactly. Take that biological reality and apply it to the sanctuary. Imagine if the sacred scent of the tabernacle, that incredibly specific, complex blend of sea mollusk, sweet cinnamon, bitter galbanum, and frankincense, was something you could smell every day in the marketplace or on your neighbor's clothes at a dinner party.
It would just become common.
It would lose all of its psychological power.
Yeah, it would just become the smell of Tuesday afternoon.
By placing a strict, absolute ban on personal use, the divine instruction ensured that whenever an Israelite caught even a faint whiff of this highly specific scent, their brain instantly, powerfully, and exclusively registered one single concept:
Presence of God.
the presence of God. It was a biological and sensory trigger reserved entirely and solely for reverence. By depriving the common world of this scent, the sanctuary became a uniquely potent psychological space.
So if you are an ancient Israelite standing outside the tent and the wind shifts, carrying that complex cinnamon and myrrh smoke toward you, there is no mistaking it for anything normal. Your body reacts before your brain even catches up. You know you are standing near the divine presence. It is a completely curated, immersive experience of awe. When you look at the whole picture, from the equalizing ransom of 6 grams of silver that proves every life has equal value, to the life or death scrubbing at the bronze basin, to the globally sourced, strictly copyrighted incense, it's breathtaking.
It really changes your perspective.
It does. This wasn't just a dry list of building codes. It was an environment perfectly designed to teach a people how to physically and psychologically survive living in the presence of ultimate holiness.
It is a masterful integration of theology, ancient economics, architecture, and intense sensory experience. It teaches that entering the presence of the Creator requires absolute intentionality, acknowledging the equality of all people, pursuing purity for survival, and giving the absolute best of what the entire global creation has to offer.
It completely changes how you read these ancient texts entirely when you see how the mechanics of it all fit together. Which brings us to the end of our deep dive today. But before you go, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Think about the immense power of tying a physical sensory anchor, like a highly specific, globally sourced, strictly exclusive smell, to a singular sacred experience. In our modern lives, we are constantly bombarded with sensory overload.
Oh, constantly.
Everything is accessible all the time. Scents, sounds, images, notifications. We consume them endlessly without a second thought. What do we lose psychologically and spiritually by not having spaces, sounds, or scents in our own lives that are entirely uncompromisingly set apart for reverence? It is something profound to think about as you go about your week.
Very profound.
Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration of Exodus chapter 30. May God bless all of you listening, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.